Okay, we're up. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to go in Krita and work on game tile sets for top-down games. It's a bit different if you make a tile set for a top-down game or if you make it for a platformer. Whoops, hold on, I have the audio. There you go. Please tell me if everything's going right as usual. No music today. You'll just have my voice. Put your in the background, and let's get started. So my reference for this tile set is the old Zelda games, the 2D Zeldas, and I have a few pictures here. I have some rips from the Minish Cap on GBA, some screenshots. And they're quite interesting, so I should have one from A Link to the Past somewhere. Hold on. Let me grab the almighty file browser. Hold on, new tileset, what's that? Okay. One is from an old game. And so, top-down art, no, it's not in there. It might be in tilesets, Zelda ALTP. There you go. So these are sprites ripped from the old game Zelda A Link to the Past that was on Super Nintendo. And it's quite interesting to see, how big a tile was on those games. And the fact that in general, most assets back then would be split, they would try to optimize the tiles and the elements to fit those cells, like the bushes, for example. It's not the case with everything. Already back then they had enough memory, to have things like the trees that are big unique elements, or the houses which are symmetrical, but aside from that, you have quite a few unique tiles in there. But yeah, tile sets originally were used to save memory because, you didn't have the... you didn't have a GPU necessarily, and you didn't have a lot of dedicated memory to play with. So you could only load so many game assets on the screen. Today we use tile sets still. I've got some from RPG Maker, for example, but mostly to gain time, to be able to generate levels with procedural tools or scripts, but also just so we can use tools like, I don't have it open, hold on. A tool like this one where, let's see, I don't have the picture right there. Let me see, just if I can find something decent for you. Yeah, okay. I have this example. It's not really pretty, but at least it should convey the point. We used that for a game jam with a friend, and we used a tile set just so that we could make long walls for the game very quickly. Okay, it's just 9 tiles. It's the same principles as the ones we're going to use for our top-down game. And, blocks of 9 tiles, and we just replicate certain textures, like this wall, for example. You can use it, to make a room of any size. And so if you have a programmer with you, you can just make a simple script that will generate rooms of any size, like that. So you can have random gameplay or arenas. That said, let's jump onto Krita and get started making a tile set. Woo! It's hot today. Really hot around here. There are a few features we can use to our advantage. So Krita, it's not the best tool for tile sets, but it's really good when it comes to painting tiling textures. And on top of that, it's the only open source image editor that has really non-destructive workflow. So the layers I have here, not these ones, but this one down there, the grass texture, is actually a Krita file embedded inside of my file. You can do that by going down to the Add Layers drop down, and you choose File Layer. It's the last one in the first group. When you do that, you can go grab any file, and I can embed, for example, my grass again. Will be added to the top left of the document. And now I have it open right there. I have my texture. And if I paint anything on it and save, go back to the other document, it has updated. So that said, it's bugged right now, so it will only update once, okay, when you open the document. So basically, now if I add something else and save, it doesn't update. But if I close this document and I reopen it, should be in Krita, grass, nope, the tileset, sorry. There you go. This time it updates. And it will update once when I add something around here, save, go back to the document, so you get the point. But the interesting part is not necessarily that it updates, but that we can work on all the textures individually. And it's interesting because Krita has a fairly unique feature. When you press W, you toggle the wraparound mode, which allows you to see your texture in a tiling context. Okay? So that's quite useful. Basically, a tileset works as such. So I have this picture here to convey that point. Let me close and reopen the document. On this one, save. Now reopen the full tile set. Okay, so back here, I've prepared that little 9 patch, which is the base of the simplest tile sets, and the really at the core of many tile sets, that's what you have. So if I get back the RPG Maker one, for example, all these big squares you can see are actually 9 tiles together. These are just patches like this one, like a large texture, subdivided in 9, 3 rows, 3 columns. And basically we use that, so I'll have to show you later maybe in RPG Maker, but one tile, the base square cell of the game, is 1/9 of the square. It's the smallest square in the middle. And the ones around it just allow you to get the outlines of the wall, of the shape. In Zelda, they should work similarly. Will be, yeah, like this one, like these types of floors or carpets, for example. You know, you have the outline, and you do have one center tile and some extra padding around its edges. And the way it works is the central tile right there is going to be our base texture. So I'll grab this one, move it up. This one in the center is the most important one. It's the base texture. It's the one that you're going to copy over and over again. And you can add later on extra variations for it. You know, it's very flexible, but this one texture has to tile perfectly. When you use few colors like I've done here, it works pretty well. You can see the result down there. But then all the tiles around it will have to tile with that one. Let's take maybe some path, for example. So I have my grass, it tiles, it works, and now we're going to create another tile. I'll go back to this document. Every time I'm gonna save it as a new document, as a new individual texture, and let's call it road. The same principle, I'm going to start with a basic background color that suggests it's a road, something quite bright, like something that looks a bit like dirt. Okay, and add a few spots for details. when you want a texture to tile, you have to be very careful that the details are distributed fairly uniformly on the texture, and that they are also similar in size. Because you can see that, for example, if I add a really tiny dot there, you can see the repetition. But now, if I use larger dots and try to not align them, but make it look like chaos. Let's see. It's pretty hard, but okay, something like that should work. Normally for roads like these, chances are you would either, paint it, like detail it quite a bit, or not put many details in there. But yeah, there you go. That's all right. If I zoom out, yeah, you don't see the tiling too much. So I'll just save it, go back to my main tileset document, and then add a file layer. Center it around here. You have to place it pretty precisely. I'm using the grid and guides for that. There's a tutorial on the channel for that. It's quite simple. Just so you know, because many people don't seem to know that too well. Yes, chaos will prevail. When you go to the settings menu and Dockers, you can add or remove Dockers. These are those panels you can dock everywhere on the interface, and so that is where you will find grid and guides. All right, so when you have this base texture, basically it's whoopsie daisies. Okay, crash. Thank you. Let's restart and then I'll show you. And that is partly why I use individual files for the textures. First of all, it makes sense to use different individual files just so that we can benefit from many layers. And you can benefit from working with multiple layers and still work seamlessly, which is really useful. Especially, these are very simple textures, but when you're working on a real production, you're going to spend time with every single texture. Oh, okay, so hi Adrien. Thanks for joining. So just so you know, this is a guy I met on the internet. It's an internet friend since we were in middle school, like 11 years old, something like that. So yeah, let's add the file again. I'll place it, right? Because the reason it's important to have this texture in the middle, basically the edges, when you want to do a path and a transition between that main path and the grass, that's often what you'll have in an outdoor setting. You'll want to reuse that texture, okay, and add some transition between the two. So let me show you how that works. I'm gonna create a clone of that layer. So I've used a shortcut to create a clone layer. Same thing, you can find it down there in the add layer dropdown, and it's under clone layer. So the clone works so that when this one gets updated, the clone will also update. And I'm going to place those clones all around. I'll just place one on the left side because I want to keep moving on this tutorial. So first of all, you can see the texture tiles, but now I'm going to pick the grass, make a copy. Okay, it crashes again. It's strange. I could duplicate it. No, I didn't duplicate it. Oh, that's the thing. Okay, so duplicating a file layer currently crashes Krita. I'll have to report the bug then. Thankfully, the next version is a bug fixing release, and it's meant to fix quite a few. So I'll work with clone layers in that case and rasterize them. Okay, yes, not duplicated. Do not duplicate it. Do not duplicate it. So here's what we're going to do. I'll take this texture up the layer stack and layer it on top of the road, basically. Make another duplicate of it. So I'll rasterize the textures for the demo because I don't want it to crash too often and to slow down too much, more importantly. And now I can duplicate it. There you go. Yeah, so these features I'm showing you. The thing is, there are very few. They are very useful, but there are fairly fairly few persons who use them. Okay, and that's the problem. They are really, really useful, but because there are not enough users, there are not enough bug reports, and yeah. So now, when you have these textures, basically on the left we place the grass, which is what we want to transition to, and on the right side we have the path. So we want to transition from the path to the grass. So we'll use the grass layer. I'm going to add a transparency mask in there and start erasing, where I want the transition to happen. All right, so now we have a base transition and it's time to paint over it. Just add a new layer, pick your favorite brush, make a selection, of the frame. I have snapping on. I'm snapping to the grid. So Shift S to open the snap menu. And thanks to that, I can paint inside of my tile. Maybe with the dark color up there. Okay, and I'm just creating a rough base for the texture. Okay, don't expect the textures in the presentation to be too pretty, because it's going to be hard to make something magnificent live, especially when you're explaining at the same time. It's not easy. But just so you know, I'm doing that because there are many votes. I'm running a Kickstarter next month, so you know, about game creation. And the thing is, people have massively voted for a 2D game a bit like Zelda, top-down. So, which means, I'm gonna have to do graphics for that. And I felt like, well, that can be interesting to share because there aren't so many tutorials about that. There are actually very few. And it's very interesting because it's just as challenging as, side-scrolling games and all. I've already done the side-scrolling course, so now it's time to move on to something else. So yeah, painting a bit of that. And as tile sets are part of the background, also, you don't want to make it pop too much, okay? It's better to just make it a bit, dull, like it is at the moment, and let the characters be very vibrant in the game. Okay, so now we have that tile. We need to move it to a different document just so that we can check that it's styling the right way. How are we going to do that? I think there's no very easy way to do it. Okay, for the presentation, I'm going to collapse it. Normally no, you can, I forgot you can copy and paste layers. Copy the layers. Go back to this texture, save it as a new one, maybe grass to road, road to grass. Normally you'd want to add a naming convention, like it's road left, road top, or numbering or whatnot. But that's fine for now. Okay, so I'll group by layers, because if you want, okay, it says it's empty. No, it's not empty. Why do you say it's empty, Krita? God. It thinks the layer is empty because it's out the frame, the canvas, I think. Okay. Nope. There you go. Okay. Yeah, so, well, you know, I've been quite busy lately. I have a lot of work, but during the campaign, I'm doing a 30 days tutorial challenge. So every single day, I'll put out a new tutorial, and there'll be a lot of game design programming, obviously, but also a little bit of game art. So there'll be things like these. We'll talk about that, definitely. There you go. I've copied everything over to that document. And, well, now we have to fix the tiling, but only in the y-axis, only in the vertical direction. I'll go back to every layer. You know, I've put my shadows on a different layer than the grass. I have the base grass texture here and the base road texture down there, so that I can take that shadow away. And then I'll just have to paint a new one if I want, or if I want to add details. I'm using a resolution of 256 pixels. As usual, you want to downscale your assets when you export them in the game. So that's twice the intended resolution of 128 pixels. You want the squares to be quite small, just so that the level designer, if that's you, then you, have flexibility when you are building the levels. That said, now the modern way to do tile sets is you're going to use more or less small squares for the ground, for example. And quite often you will see things like these. Let's see, yeah, there was this game, Medora, which unfortunately has been cancelled. But it's inspired by the old Zeldas and all, and you can see in the game how you have tiles for the ground, and you have variations and all, and they are pretty small. So I'd expect one tile is the size of the bush, right there. Maybe 32 by 32, I think. Yeah, something like that. And then you have the house that's just a unique sprite. And the trees are much larger, you know, as well. It's just because you don't have problems with memory nowadays, so you can do pretty much whatever you want. And you can always layer two different tile sets with different resolutions. The one that's small, maybe for the ground, and one that's larger for the game assets. Or you can also have tiles for the ground, and then assets that you place by hand on a layer above that. So something like the Godot game engine allows you to do that pretty easily. All right. Yes, it does look like Pokemon. A little bit. So now let's fix this styling really quickly. It's mostly around the seams that you want to fix that, and then make sure, so it's a bit trickier in those cases, and that's where Krita is not the best tool for the job, but you just want to spot the errors you have going vertically. And now there's one problem with the grass, because there's only one strand of grass, you can clearly see the repetition. So in that case, you either want to take it out, and it's not a problem since it's right in the middle of the texture, so it won't create any issues with the tiling for the game. But you can either take it out, that's the easiest thing to do, or you can add another one. And ideally, you'd want not to add it right on the seam, actually, just to avoid extra work later on. But as it's just a simple demo, I'm gonna do that real quick. By the way, as people usually ask for the brushes in the streams, I think I put up a link, a card. Normally, you should have that right on the video, you know. I have the new ones that are out, at least in the premium version, and then I'll have to put these new thumbnails out as well in the how's it called? The free version, the light version. Yeah, and there's one problem when you work over the seam with transforms. They don't work well in Krita. You can't transform like over the seam. You can only paint, erase, pick colors, but not transform, sadly. Well, I mean, you can transform something that you create here and go place it over the seam, but then you'll have to duplicate it manually. It's just going to get cut, right? So that's something maybe that could be improved in the future. And yeah, simple grass trends, simple patterns are best when you're starting out, so just so you don't waste too much time. And if you have any questions, by the way, don't hesitate to ask, because there's only so much to say about those things. Yeah, so the tile seems to be all right now. I'll save it, go back to the main document, erase what I have in there, and add a new file layer. Oh yeah, road to grass. One thing I really wish I'd love to see improved is snapping. Just having snapping for base layers like these, because it works for vectors, but not for these. And snapping the layers bounding box to the grid is super useful. Super, super useful. Okay, so on the other side, well, considering how we've made the texture, we can't just, you know, oh, I won't duplicate, right? I'll create a clone and flatten it. There you go. We can't just flip the texture over. That's, again, something we'll be limited with. Let me see. Transform, Krita, please. Whoa. Do I have a selection? Yes, I had a selection. Okay. Yeah, we can't just flip. You can see it does Untile as well. We're going to have to make another texture and another texture for the top, for the bottom, and the corners as well. Okay. So the way you build the way you build these is you start with the middle tile, then you add the top, left, right, and bottom. And then you do the corners that connect with the left, right, top, and bottom tiles. Okay, are there other complications to making grass or details, adding details over the seam like I've done here, other than transforms? Yes, there are. The first one is, now if we add the corner right there at the top, we're gonna have to make sure it transitions well with this detail, okay? Let me show you the problem we'll have if I just remove the grass down there and start fresh. So let's say this is the starting point for our corner. Yes, the problem is going to be that we need something to tile with this grass down there now. And the problem is going to come up often. So that is why when you build your tile set, you're going to use very simple colors and textures and build the levels with that at first. If you want to be efficient, you don't want to be too artsy. You'd rather want to go fast and do something more like that to start with. Set up your base layers and all that stuff. And just start to make the levels and see if your tile set is flexible enough, you know, if your structure is good enough, because there are plenty of ways to make a tile set. the basic one, the most basic one is this 9 patch. But then you might want to have, corners like these. Hold on, can I add a new layer? Yes. You might want to have, so you will have something like that. Let me draw the directions. Corners, straight, and center, like that. But then you might want to have a corner that not only goes like this, but that goes, upwards. Let me see. Hold on, this one. Oh, yeah. You might want inner corners instead of outer corners, or outer corners instead of inner corners. So you will have the bottom corner that's like that, but you might want to have one that connects that way, where you have the road. Let me use color dots. The road and the grass, instead of having the grass on the outside and the road on the inside. So this is something that will add complexity to your tile set. And hold on, because I got some old ones. In my career, when you make art for mobile games, you don't get to make tile sets too often, because things like platformers and all, you don't have too many opportunities to work on them. I worked mostly on arcade games. But here's an old tile set. Yeah, okay, it's gonna open in Photoshop. Please, I beg your pardon. Please be nice to me. Yes, this is Photoshop. And there you go. So you have an example of what I'm talking about, with variations and a bit more complexity. So you have that same structure. It's exactly the same, okay? It's just a side view instead of being a top-down view. But the principle is the same. So you have those tiles going up, you have those corners with rocks on the outside, okay? And then right there, you have those inward corners. So that's an old game we worked on with my partner when I had we were an indie development studio. And yes, there's a question, can you upload those references somewhere? I will. The only thing is I want to do a proper template for myself, and then I will share it with you. So that might be, not just right after the stream, in 2 weeks, maybe, something like that. But yeah, so this one has some extra things like slope right there, because we wanted to use tile sets just so we could work with that program tiled. Where did I put it? Okay, I closed it, I guess. But at the same time, we wanted to have slopes, for which you need meshes and all. Yeah, the top-down reference. Don't worry, I'll share it definitely. But I first have to create a proper reference for myself, because it's been a while since I made one. So once I've made the template, I will share it with you. No problem. So yeah, we only had a simple, a simple 2D engine for that, and we wanted to use tiles, pretty big tiles, by the way. The grid is not set up, okay. But we wanted to have slopes, so these slopes work as such. They are very simple. You have the ground level on one tile, and you will have one of those ground tiles up there, and one of those ground tiles down there. That's it. And then we would just draw the collisions right on top of it, and that would work. So yeah, that's about it. This one is fairly simple, and then you can see the same principle we have as with our edge right there. It's the transition from grass to dirt, and the dirt tiles are available at the bottom. And you also have the cloud platforms. Yeah, that was a cute little game. Okay. Any questions? Making them in high resolution makes it harder than what people admire through SNES games. Nope. Painting is not harder. Actually, pixel art is a lot more work most of the time. The big difference, however, is that when you use a dedicated program, like pixel art programs tend to have built-in functionality for people working with tilesets. If you get something like Pixel Edit, this one has built-in tools just to create tilesets. Actually, that was their main selling point. Like that, where you can, I think, yeah, you have the tiles, Docker on the right, and then you can place those tiles in a scene, and when you paint inside those tiles, they update in the view. All right, let's see how we can make corners now. Again, for the sake of presentation, I'm gonna go pretty fast. I'm not going to make everything, super clean. I'm going to work in this file just to show you a few tricks, because you're not going to create all the tiles from scratch every time. As you've seen, we've used this base texture already, and just gonna make it tile real quick. Okay, fix it, done. Now it works. This shadow will tile properly. It's only the grass that won't, but that's not a problem. I'm just going to erase everything and get to the corner straight away. So the trick with corner, the one I use at least, when you are using paint like that, with pixel art it'd be a bit different because it's really quick to place those base colors. But when you're using paint, well, here's how you can do it. Hold on. This is, yeah, okay. This is a file layer. I'm going to collapse them all so it doesn't crash. There we go. Okay, so here's what I've done. I've layered my, left tile and the top one on top of one another. And again, I'm gonna use a mask and just mask out part of it. And there you go. That's the quick and dirty way to do it. What did I do? Did I mess up? Oh, okay, it's the opacity. That's there you go. You just erase part of it, and then you obviously do another pass to tweak everything. Something like that. So you can see already when I said when you place details on top of the seam, here are the types of problems that arise. You get that element at the top of the grass corner, just for it to tile with the bottom one. So you have to make sure to get rid of that, because otherwise when you go back to the base texture, which is the most important one, remember? Well, it won't tile properly if you leave that detail at the top. And so yeah, you have a really quick base when you do that. You can just go ahead, erase bits, and add extras on top. Also, when you are building your tile set, don't hesitate to use sharp brushes at first when you're painting. Even if you're going with a fairly painterly style, like I'm doing, for everything that's like shadows and all, you still want to define fairly sharp edges and transitions in places, so don't hesitate to use those. Yeah, doing tile sets with, a painterly style is very uncommon. Actually, preparing this project, I had to ask some friends who are some actually professional game developers about reference games that would use that style. And the only one I could find, hold on, that should be in there, top-down game art. It's one of the games in the thumbnail. Hold on, I have it right there. This one, Ittle Dew, is one of the very few games that uses a more cartoon, painterly style, and that's still like a top-down, tile-based game. These are very rare, honestly. So actually, if you go ahead and do something with a lot of, a very painterly style, not even what like what I'm doing at the moment, but something very detailed, very refined, I think you could make a fairly unique Zelda-like. Yes, the stream will be up later. Don't worry, it's automatic actually. All my streams are available to watch as replay, in replay. So yeah, then to complete the whole square, well, that's one of the things that are maybe a bit easier when you do pixel art, because you have few opportunities to make things like circles and all kinds of curves and all. When you create the tiles, it can actually be easier because quite often you rotate them like that, they'll just work out of the box. Well, or if you flip them and all, and I can show you that on the, I think, Minish Cap, for example, or even Midora, but something very common for grass, for example, is to, whoa, that's dirty. Yes, JPEGs from the internet. It depends on the style, but you can see in Midora that those little grass bits can very easily flip the tile and then just change a few pixels because you're working with very clean colors and all. There's no, not so much blending. So yeah, it's fairly easy to create this kind of base road. And you can see in the game how simple the tiles are. And I think if we go to Minish Cap, it's the same. They are fairly simple. So the base road tile is that square in the middle. Okay, the base texture is that. And for the grass, it must be the same. Yeah, you can see it's a green tile like that. It's just one color. Okay, and it works. It works perfectly. Then, however, you make a lot of variations. You make little dots and all, and these are placed either by hand or a mix of doing things by hand and using the, your level editor to generate variations for you. Okay? Your teacher showed you... who's your teacher? Pinky Pony? Because my Godot tutorials are, yeah, I only have a few, so they're not so great right now. There's going to be a lot more. Is it Lars, or is it in another school? So yeah, the idea is that you're going to create the base, you're going to create those corners and all, create the levels with that, and actually, once you have a template, so something, when I say a template, I really mean something like what I have down there. Something like that, and maybe you could have a template with a few more indications for, but colors are enough. But for your level designer, you might just use the color of the grass, for example, here, just to say that's the grass, and then the color of the road up there. And the good thing with that is, if you're working with a team, you can get started making the game. No problem, you don't need anything more than that. And you'll add the extra tiles you're missing, Maybe, so as I said, some indications like these, just so you don't mess up. But then they can build the levels. And you, in the meantime, the artist, you will be doing that. And when... as soon as possible, you're just going to send them the updated texture like that. Let me get back to this one. Let's finish that little tileset base. I'll just rotate, because I want to show you the result, what you can do. It's quite limited with a 9 patch like this. You know, you need those extra corner tiles to get some more flexibility, but I'll show you that we can already have a nice path. And also, my tiles are quite big right now, so you know, that's something I didn't have time, you know, enough time to prepare the tile set beforehand, because that's something you need to create the game and calibrate the tiles based on the game and all. So that can take quite a bit of time as well. The fact also that, you know, I have wavy edges like I do, you know, on the path shadow is not going to work too great. And yeah, there's one comment, the road looks like bread right now. Yeah, it would definitely need some color correction. And those dots are not so great, a bit over the top. But hey, that's how it goes when you make everything live and you try to explain at the same time. At least I hope you're getting the point, because that's the most important part. You know. So let's take our bread and put it in tiled. Hold on. Yeah. I'm gonna simplify the grass here as well. Not gonna be the most beautiful tile set, but it should do the trick. Maybe we can add a filter layer just to fix the bread-like effect. Color adjustment. The details really make it look weird, but at least it'd be able to. Yeah, no, not gonna work. Color balance. Just trying to find a quick fix. I don't have to go back to the texture too much. And we can move forward. Actually, I'm saying that, but I don't know. I don't really know what to talk about afterwards. Maybe we'll talk about props and placing things on top of that. Nick is asking, I'm familiar with Photoshop, but this is the first time seeing of Krita. What's pros and cons of using Krita over Photoshop? The main pro with Krita, I'd say, is there are a few tools that are really useful. I don't recommend to use Krita over Photoshop. I recommend to use both in combination, because Krita still lacks a lot of features that a game developer will need and that Photoshop has. That's very clear in that regards. On Windows, it's not always stable and all. You've seen the tiling texture like you can have here. When you make more complex painterly texture, it's great to have. It's really missing in Photoshop. You have plenty of things that don't exist in Photoshop, natively at least. You don't have any pen smoothing. You have pen smoothing options in here. You do have really good blending brushes as well. I know that Photoshop has some, but Krita has a good focus on that. And overall, for less experienced artists, you know, it's very good for everything like illustration and all. The interface is simple. There are, I'd say, advantages like these, and many new features coming with each and every release. It's not like Adobe that's really slowing down right now, you know. But on top of that, as you can read in the comments, it's free and open source, and the more, you know, visibility it gets, the faster it improves, because you have more bug reports, more students or developers who dabble into it a little bit. And you will see that with the upcoming Python programming in the next version, you will have more and more plugins. I expect we'll see the same thing as in Blender or GIMP, where lots of people create free plugins. That's very common. Well, when you use a proprietary tool, not only do you pay for the tool, you don't contribute or choose the new features that come, as part of the program. But on top of that, all the plugins, the extra tools and all tend to be paid for, especially if you're looking for good tools. Well, if you look at Blender, for example, you have plenty of add-ons that just aren't available in 3ds Max and all that stuff for free. And it's you have a lot of things that are of a stellar quality, really. But yeah, just for 1 second, because I work with Photoshop, I still do plenty of things with it, like everything that has to do with text, everything that has to do with graphic design because of styles and all. I use another program called Affinity Designer. So just to say that I'm not, with this channel and all, I'm not asking you to go ahead and only use open source. It's not going to happen. All the game developers I know use Photoshop. But you have some things that are not available in Photoshop and that are really great for characters and all. Let me grab a character for a second, just so I can show you. This illustration. Something typical. I have a character, and I have plenty of sprites on it. Let's open it up. I think it was just for a demo, so yeah. So I have plenty of layers in there. And imagine that's a character I want to animate and all. And there are some things with the proportions, and I'm asked to fix them a bit. Happens often even at this stage, Well, in Krita, I can just take the group, get the liquify tool, and tweak the character proportions. You can see there are some issues, for example, in mirror mode. And yeah, when I press enter, Krita will recalculate all the layers in the group individually, so it's non-destructive. So there are some quirks, sometimes it doesn't update and all, small things like these, but overall it works really great. And for plenty of things like these, this is something that's probably not ever coming to Photoshop. Adobe is really slow at adding those things. They have a very old program, hundreds, well, dozens, or I heard a team of 100 engineers working on the program. So things are really slow. While with Krita, it's really fast. And we have, I think I saw someone from the KDE board. No, maybe not. Maybe I'm mistaken. But yeah, you can. Don't hesitate to go and ask people from the community and all, and to talk about your experience with Photoshop with Krita. Especially if we can have more professionals on board to give feedback on the feature, it will help everyone in the long run. So let's export the tileset and open tiled real quick. I'll make a new map, and it'll be it'll be 256. Hey, 200. Okay, my numpad was down. 256. 10 by 10 will be enough. So that's quite big. I'll just zoom out to show you what we can do with a 9 patch like that. That is not a lot. So this program is open source as well. Really popular when it comes to creating tile-based levels. I'll import my tile set, and there we go. We have it. Zoom out. Well, there, 25%. And so there you go. Here's the way I often work. I'll put the tiles I need the most right on the board in the top left. And then I'll start painting like that. Oop-la-dee-doo. That. And now I can fill the rest. And there you go. That's about the extent of it. You know, that's all you can do with a simple 9 patch like that. So then, we'll need to add those tiles. I'm just flipping the tile around because I can do that. Hold on, it's H. Hold on, how do you do that already? I don't remember. But yeah, basically, we're missing. I'm just adding those tiles to show how we're missing some things like these. They will want to have a more elaborate path right there. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice a little. It's just that time of the day. But yeah, let's say we want to make areas like these. Well, we need those inner tiles as well, and we're missing them. Let's add them real quick. To do them, you want so these areas are a little more complex to create that than what we had until now. I'll place it. Yeah, okay. Let me grab some corner. So those I call them the inner or outer corners. You know, the way they work is I'm really losing my voice, actually. I think the stream will not go on for very, very long. Okay. So we want a corner that goes from this one to down like that with road on the inside. Well, can't really say on the inside, but we want the grass to be the small part and the road to take most of the space. And then for these, you only need to tile with corners like that. Because, you know, the way we designed the tiles, we made sure that the sides tile with the center, and we made sure that the corners tile with the sides, which means the corners tile with everything, basically. The tile making program is the level design program is called Tiled. And so now we're going to use the same trick as before to create those tiles. So I showed you to create the corner. I would take the you know, the side, the left and the top, for example, for the top left corner. Well, here I'm going to take the left and the bottom one to create this tile. So copy, paste these. Okay, wrong layer. Where is it? Down there. Copy, paste. I'll just place them in the corner right there. So yeah, these are my main tricks basically when making tile sets. Nothing too exceptional about it. Don't hesitate to use them, especially when you are, you know, prototyping the game. You don't want to waste time making individual graphics and finalized and all. Honestly, in my experience, you spend so much time creating games, really like a ton of time. You really want to spend as little time making the graphics as you can. Done. I'm looking for my shortcut. Nope. Control-Shift-T. Yes. Transparency. Okay. Okay, so I'll do something like that. There we go. We have it. So when you do that, the corner doesn't look too great, obviously. So there again, I like Krita for that. I can take both layers, use the liquify tool. I'll just pull that part in. Trying not to mess up the edges too much, to have a better roundness in there. And then you want to paint over the seam a little bit. This transition around here, that's not really clean. And there you go, you're done. And so now with this style, I'll just duplicate it around. You have all 4 sides. Set up and ready for my tile set, and then I'll show you the result in tiled. Okay, it's not a very clean job, but I'll do the trick. Group, flip them over. Okay. And there we go. We have our corner tiles. They're not going to work perfectly. That's where you also want to use the trick you've seen on the source references, and using a base color for the tiles is a really good idea. Those cartoon styles, I'm making a training about that right now. This type of cel-shaded art, basically. And it's really efficient. It's a really efficient way to make art, and that's why it's used in the animation industry, for shadows and all on the characters, but also in games quite a lot, in 2D games. So now I'd just like to fill this block, the background at least, with this color. Fix some issues and paint over these. So there again, the last few things I'm doing, don't do that when you're working, unless you're in a game jam or something like that. It's just for the sake of presentation. I'm trying to go fast, so then I can get to your questions. Okay, let's say it's good enough. I'll save it again, PNG. And then if I go back to tiled, it reloads everything for us. And so then let me check for this one. I need that, this one, and there you go. Now it's a bit more flexible. Questions? You're all welcome. Thank you. A bit off topic, but does tile support arbitrary size, placement, and rotation of objects for non-tiled games? Yes. So you'd better do that in the game engine. For example, Godot supports that, and most game engines support that. Like, tiled is really good at tiles, basically. But if you have another editor, you're better off using that. But yes, you can load textures. I don't remember exactly how. We used them once, but you can place, you have those tools at the top in the toolbar for shapes. So you can also draw areas, rectangles and all. You can assign data for that. And I think it exports as JSON, or it has its own format called TMX. That's basically XML. If you wanted to polish up the path, what strategies would you use? Just making less dots? So considering it doesn't look too great right now, yes, I would I would just go back and make it a single color. The thing is, normally you build the art direction for the game, separately. So you make sure you kind of define your color palette and all as you go. And then I would, yes, make a much simpler base texture and make many variations for it. So some things a lot more detailed, like instead of having dark dots over it, I would go back in there, because that is really ugly. Well, that's okay, but that's not great art. I would just make the art a lot more believable. Let's see, I had a selection. So yeah, instead, I would have something like, I would go... do something like that. Too bad. Went there. So I would go to a website with textures and start looking at how it looks in the real world. You have a ground category on textures.com. I'll leave you the website. This is a website to find plenty of source photos that are good for, texture creation, but for 3D games for the most part. I would go with soil, maybe, is a better... Yeah, okay. You can find mud or something like rough might be the right category. And I'd start to look at how it is in the real world. For the most part, these are kind of like slopes, not really paths. But with a website like that, you can get really high resolution photos of how, they look, those things look in the real world, and just find real details to abstract. Something like that is quite interesting. Let's see, so that is mud, but the interesting part about it is pebbles. Well, I would probably then go back in there and start working, making some small rock sprites like that. And make all these as variation tiles. I would start with simple shapes and then go ahead and paint them. And make a library of those, more importantly, because when you are making tiles like that, all the details that you add, and especially if you are painting them all, I would personally make a library of those small details so that they can be easily recolored and used in another context. Something like that might work. And then below them, I would add some shadows as well. So I would start to work a lot more on the lighting too. However, just be wary, because the more details like these that you add, and working with a painterly style has that defect, then you cannot use tricks like when you go back to tiled, you cannot just rotate the tiles anymore. You can't do anything you want, so then you would have to work a bit differently. Hold on. So, hey, Ivan, we started, a little while ago, but you will have the replay afterwards. How is it working for animated grass or ripples on water, wind effect, whatever? Do you use GIF files? No, you don't. It works like that. So let me show you. Just to wrap up with that, that's basically the way I would do it. So I would slowly build up, details, shadows, everything, until, I have tiles that look good, basically. So now I would, that works like that. When you want to have animated tiles, hold on, I should have some reference in there. RPG Maker has those. Let me check them there. Maybe in my documents. There we go. Tile sets. And you have all the tile sets from RPG Maker. And here's a sample. Here's how you do it. Like usual, you do animation frames. There you go. That's all that for this simple answer. But basically, you redo the tile set with the animation frames. Another way to do it in much older hardware was to you had so that's a bit complex, and that's something you can't do with Krita. You have to use a specialized program, but they would use indexed palettes. So let me see. How is it called? Cause I think yeah, it's Cosmigo promotion. That's a pretty powerful program for pixel artists. And this program allows you to replace the color palette. Ah, crap. Let's see the official website. In this program, you can modify the color palette of your sprites. And basically, in the engine, you would take that color palette. So it's an array, a list of colors that are in your image, and you rotate part of it. So you might take 5 colors, and then you let them rotate. Let me see. I show you. I know it can do that like live. Yes, color cycling. There you go. Yeah, these are pretty well known. Those scenes, you know, they have no animation frames. It's a single sprite, and basically you get animation. Hold on. If I can find the source, yes, this one. And yeah, you will see some animation and all that's happening is the color palette. A part of it is changing, and then you have some you know, also the ability to see it throughout the day and at night, and that works simply thanks to, you know, using a different color palette, a different set of colors for the same scene. Yeah, that's one way to do it, but that's the old school, pretty hardcore way. You could use a shader as well. You take water like that, you can use a shader to kind of move the pixels in the game. That would be more a more technical way to do it. Okay, so let's see. Paolo is asking a common question: what program am I using to navigate the project? This one is Directory or Opus. It's only you can search for Dopus, D-O-P-U-S, and it's a paid program, but it was on the Humble Bundle a while ago, and it's very powerful. It's very messy. It's heavily customizable. It has tons of features, way too many, actually, but it's quite powerful. So it allows me to do, you know, even by default, things like open PowerShell. Hold on, PowerShell, not the common prompt. Or even open it as an admin and things, plenty of things I need to do all the time. So that's why I'm using this program. It's really powerful. And I have another one to recommend, which is cross-platform for Linux users around here. It's called Fman. And this one is a bit technical. I don't have a license. I've just tried it real quick. This one is a lot more technical, where it has the controls of an old program called Commander, I think. I've never used that, but that's the idea. And I know that its strength is, hold on, Control P. So its main strength is that you can go to some place and it has auto-completion for the folders. You type anything and it filters, and every time, you know, you can press tab to move down the directories, and when you press enter, you go to that directory. And by the way, This one, I think it's pretty cheap, but you can use it for free as well. You'll just have a prompt that asks you to click a button when you start. And on top of that, it's quite recent and it gets frequent updates. I found it interesting. And it's customizable with Python as well. You have plenty of plugins and you can find them on GitHub and all. Another question, instead of using color, do you ever use just grayscale? Then you can use masks to adapt the colors later. This might speed up the creation of repetitive environments. I've never done it in practice because it works if you have a more modular system and a certain art direction that allows it. So let me check. I know there's a tileset generator. There are a few programs that do that where you can generate tilesets, and I know there's a pixel art tileset generator. There's a program, I think that this one, Spartan. It's a program that, you connect nodes to create textures, and it creates pixel art tiling textures. And in the case like this, yes, basically the base data is grayscale in a sense, and then you choose how you color everything. And it works for some things like the lava, or, might work for the grass, not too great, but it can work in some instances. Yeah, you can try that, definitely. I prefer to work directly with colors because I want to select them quite precisely. And when you start with a grayscale image and you want to color it later on, it's a lot harder. So let me show you. Some people do that and work that way for illustrations, and it works well. But if I take a very technical element, like sprites, when I'm working with games and all, it's a bit harder because when you're doing that for an illustration, so I'll desaturate it. The way you do it is you start painting a bit freely on a new layer with a friendly, color blending mode. So you set the layer to color and you start painting. But the thing is, when I start to paint with that orange, I just get levels of that same color instead of what I have here, where I have some hue shifting. So look at the hue ring on the advanced color selector. It's subtle, but when I get to the darker color, I have some hue shifting. And I do use something quite often, however, is working with grayscale or not, but I use, where is it? Adjustments and gradient map. It's this one. I use something like that just to tint my sprites, for example. Okay, so typically something you can do in Photoshop and you can't in Krita. There's a gradient mapping filter, but it's not stable and it's not fast at all. And in Photoshop, you can not only use the gradient filter, but you can also use conditional blending like that to only apply it to the shadows, for example. And, do something a bit like an Instagram do something that feels a bit like an Instagram filter, for example. Okay, Nick has a question. Can you run through your workflow by program or type of program from tileset creation to creating the game? Yeah, the only thing is I don't have a project set up in a game engine. But, you've seen the Krita part. In Photoshop, I would do things a bit differently where, hold on, I had that example. Where is it? Tilesets. Where did I put it? Ah, there. So let's take the other one, for example. It's a bit messy, but I would take a template. I paint the textures on different layers. It depends a lot on what I'm painting. Hold on. Yeah, so I group everything and all that stuff. Then I export that as a single PNG image, which you can see there. Open it up in tiled. So hold on, I might have still the level files. So that way I can show you. Should be 2014. This one and level design. Let me see. I'm gonna try to grab all that and unzip it. Might take a while. Any other questions in the meantime? Well, let me abort. I'll try to just grab one level then. This one. Yeah, okay, it's very fragmented, I guess, so it's gonna take a while. Really big archive. You can achieve a similar effect to the gradient map with curves, filter on Krita. No, that's quite different. So, yes, you can sometimes kind of achieve the look and feel, but using a gradient ramp is quite different. It allows you to do really a lot of things where you can play with put exactly with the colors you want, on the gradient. You could go, have a really split toning effect somewhere. And in Krita, you're quite limited. And to make games, I use Krita, Photoshop. I work with the two, Godot now, and yeah, tiled for the tile maps. I'd use some stuff for the sound as well. I have FL Studio I've been using for a long time. I make a bit of music as well. A program for writing. I use Visual Studio Code for everything with programming. When I'm actually working on a game, the programs I use are a bit different than what I show on the tutorials. Okay, and we have Ben that's having fun in the chat. Let's see. Do I block him? Okay, I'll leave it there, and if there's one more message like that, I'll just block you. Okay, so showing the next step in tileset, and getting from, making the tileset to the game. Could be this one. Does it work? Okay, it's a bit bugged, but... Okay, yeah, okay, well, just calm down in the chat, and let's delete... I can't delete everything, I have better. Okay. Block. Yeah, block better. There you go. There you go. So, yeah, that's the next step. Although, these are pretty old files, so they don't work exactly as expected with the resolution of that. And just to tell you, using tile, I wouldn't place all the tiles by hand. I just placed like dirt, for example, and then I would press a key. I had a little script, and this generates, all the borders like that. It checks if it's, on the bottom or on the top edge, and it would add the bumps as well, and the rock variations right in the middle. So there you go. And then you just put the game in the file. I don't use Game Maker Studio. Nope, I've tried it, but there's Godot now, so yeah, I prefer to use Godot. Personally, I mean, even if I were to talk about my personal opinion, then I will cover Godot on the channel because it's open source, and I try to cover tools that everyone has access to. Okay. And how complicated is Godot for someone with no programming experience? Well, as with any game making tool, because making games is not easy, it's pretty complicated to get started. As in, it's not that it's extremely hard, but when you're going into programming, you need to have that mindset where you're ready to struggle. You have to be ready to struggle. Programming is like that. So that's a good occasion to talk about that. Making games, you're going to struggle when you start to actually make them. You'll have to solve a lot of problems that are very specific to your game. You won't have tutorials telling you exactly do this and do that. That's just how the job is. And with programming, for example, I see people go to tools like there was Construct2, Stencil, things like these, where it's visual, and there's going to be the visual scripting in Godot as well. And people are like, yeah, it's easier. And thing is, it's not easier. It's just that it makes you feel more comfortable with that daunting task that programming is. And it does create a bit of a visual bridge between the language and you. But at the end of the day, when you are using those visual systems, you are programming. You are creating variables. You are working with data and all that stuff. And, you're going to be quite limited if you don't understand the underlying concepts. The best way to understand them is to embrace language, to learn its structure and all. Thankfully, though, programming languages are very simple. You can only do so many things, and then you have to learn like the functions, the tools that are in the game engine, and you do that step by step. So yeah, if you accept the fact that you're going to have to read, you're going to have to learn words, functions, what they mean in a sense, as when you are learning a language, you can have a lot of fun with that. And the thing is, for example, in Construct2, with the blocks that you have, the visual things, you're going to create variables and all. I don't have Construct2, but I do have RPG Maker there, which I didn't use that much. But that's my friend Adrien has left. He had to go, but that's how we met, and that's how I got started with games when I was, I don't know, maybe 12, 13. I would slack a lot. I was the type of guy who would procrastinate a lot. But yeah. So if you take RPG Maker, which has an event-based programming system, which is quite visual in nature. Let me check. How do I go to the event layer? I don't even know. I just want to show you that, yeah, actually, it's not that hard. Oh, it's right there. So yeah, with this system, I can click anywhere and, add a new event on a given cell. And then I'm going to set the content of the event. So I'm going to do things like, for example, show text. And then I choose the face of the character and write the text. So that, doing these things in a visual way is very handy because, you don't want to write that as code. For example, if we were in a game programming environment, whoops, you would have something like that, show text, image equals blah, 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 text equals, and then you would write the text in there, just say hello, and I can do the same here in a visual way, and it's a lot more convenient. However, you are doing plenty of things like, you have control progression, and you can control variables in there. You will choose the variable, you will choose the operation, you will add something to it and all. It is very slow, and that's something you're doing all the time in games. Well, if you're doing that in a programming environment with the programming language, you will just do variable, my variable equals 3 plus 4. You just write it directly. This is Visual Studio Code. This is not Atom, but a really good code editor. Yeah, so as far as style is concerned, the files are kind of XML, JSON. You have a JSON export, and the default format is XML, and you have importers for various engines. So Unity has one, Godot has one. So yeah, there are plugins, and I think there's going to be built-in support eventually. It's one of the things they considered doing, at least. There you go. That said, it's 5:30. Okay, I'm losing my voice, and I've showed you basically, everything there was to show. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. Otherwise, I'm gonna cut the stream for today. Unity is free to use. It's not open source, and if you want everything, you'll pay a license. So yeah, but you have that in Godot, so you can go ahead and use that. All right, I guess that's it for today. Thank you for being around, as always, and until I launch the Kickstarter, I'm going to be quite busy. I'll try to stream. There will be some videos on the channel, but a few less tutorials. However, during the Kickstarter, 30 days, 30 tutorials. Okay. So yeah, 30 tutorials, including some streams, like this one, but a lot of quality videos. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye-bye. Gonna stop the stream now. Whoa, look at all those windows. Crazy. And yeah, see ya.